entities so much as possible, and not recognizing their authority. Many who were in the streets heard about the curfew that was imposed at 4 p.m. yesterday afternoon and held and was in force all night. And they did not respond to it because they believe that President Zelaya is the one president and he is the only one who can give an order for a curfew. And so they continue to celebrate in the streets.
Andres is joining us from inside the Brazilian embassy in Tegucigalpa. We're also joined from Washington, D.C. by Mark Weisbrot. He's co-director of the Center for Economic and Policy Research and president of Just Foreign Policy. He's written extensively on the Honduran crisis and is a longtime analyst of Latin American affairs. Mark, could you explain the significance of Zelaya's return, particularly coming on the eve of the United Nations General Assembly?
Yes, well, I think it will make a big difference. You know, there's been a big gap from the beginning since the coup on June 28th. There's been a big gap between the United States and the rest of the world on this situation. You know, the General Assembly of the United Nations, the Organization of the American States, the UNASUR, the Union of South American Nations, they all said right away that they wanted an immediate and unconditional return of the elected President Zelaya. And the United States has never really said that. In fact, the Arias Accords put all kinds of conditions on his return, including incorporating the people who led the coup into his government and moving the elections forward. And in fact, as Andres mentioned, you know, Brazil has been a strong supporter of Zelaya, and the foreign minister of Brazil said a couple of months ago, he complained to Hillary Clinton that these conditions were placed in the Arias agreement, that, you know, that this was not what the Organization of American States wanted or the United Nations or anyone else. So he said this publicly. And so there's always been this big gap, but the administration has been able to paper it over because there hasn't been much attention on Honduras. And so now, with the General Assembly and and the attention focused by Zelaya's dramatic return, Obama is going to have to choose sides more than they have in the past. This administration has been very ambivalent. They've gone back and forth, you know, between saying that, you know, he should be restored and then saying really almost the opposite. And on August 4th, they sent a letter, for example, to President Lugar, where they backed off quite a bit from supporting Zelaya. And, you know, Zelaya has been here 6 times since he was overthrown here in Washington, and President Obama has not met with him once, even though he's gotten requests from people who are very close friends and allies of his and Democratic members of Congress. And so these are the kind of signals, mixed signals, that this government has sent to the leaders of the coup, and that has strengthened their resolve all the way along. And they're very stubborn right now, for example. It's going to take a lot more pressure to get them out of there, a lot more, both international and domestic from within the United States. There's going to have to be a lot more pressure on the Obama administration to actually force them to leave.
And exactly what could the Obama administration do if it was committed to preserving the democratically elected leaders, Zelaya? What is the relationship the U.S. has with Honduras?
Oh, there's quite a bit more they could do. First of all, on August 11th, 16 members of Congress sent a letter to President Obama and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and asking them to freeze the assets of the coup leaders. And even the government, they can also freeze their assets. You know, when President Aristide of Haiti was overthrown the first time, George Bush the first actually froze some of the assets of the dictatorship and gave it to the government in exile, to President Aristide. And this was, a Republican president who actually, that government actually supported or was involved in the coup initially. And so this is a minimum they could do. They could, they could put all kinds of pressure that they haven't put. And again, you see our Secretary of State, she's trying to say, well, both sides should do this, both sides. She even said last night that she supported the curfew that this government has put, on people to prevent them from peacefully assembling. And so this is the kind of thing. And, there has not been one word from this administration about the massive human rights violations committed by this dictatorship, the thousands of arbitrary arrests and detentions, the beatings. People have been shot and actually killed at demonstrations. These human rights abuses have been denounced by Human Rights Watch, by Amnesty International, by the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights of the Organization of American States, by Honduran human rights groups, by Europe, and nothing has come out of this administration. I think that really says a lot. That tells you how much this government has not wanted to undermine the dictatorship in Honduras. That's what's going to have to change, and I think there's going to be more international pressure and hopefully domestic pressure as well to change that.
Mark Weisbrot, to the surprise of the coup regime, Zelaya's returned to Honduras. He's now in the Brazilian embassy in Tegucigalpa. But if he were in New York and wanted to address the UN General Assembly, what would happen at the United Nations? Who would they recognize?
Well, they would recognize him, and he would get enormous support. And that was, I'm sure, his other plan. If he hadn't gone back to Honduras, he would have spoken there. But this, I think, is much more powerful. I mean, that would have gotten maybe, a few lines here and there in the news. This now forces it to the world attention. You're going to see a lot of support in the United Nations and from various heads of state for Zelaya.